Welcome to Podomation, where we talk about all things automation and industrial cybersecurity. Podomation is brought to you by ISA, the International Society of Automation.
Welcome to Podomation. I'm Morgan Four, and today we're bringing you a conversation from the front lines of industrial cybersecurity, where digital transformation meets the realities of keeping critical operations safe, resilient, and running. At ISA's OT Cybersecurity Summit in Prague, we started the day off with the Cyber Empowerment Forum. Moderated by Samford with Schneider Electric, the panel brings together leaders who are shaping the future of OT cybersecurity. Together, they share practical strategies for moving beyond a compliance mindset and positioning cybersecurity as a driver of operational excellence and business resilience. Then, Berta Jarošová took the stage to further discuss transatlantic cyber cooperation. Check out some of the key messages from each group.
First, some words of welcome from ISA CEO Claire Fallon.
ISA has been involved in cybersecurity standardization for many years. We actually started the ISA 99 committee in 2001. And I think there are probably a few of you who weren't born then, but I won't comment on that. But of course, that led to the globally recognized ISA IEC 62443 series of standards. And we're going to have a lot of discussion about that here over the next couple of days. From there, we went on to develop much needed training and certification related to cybersecurity. We've also developed many other great programs, including ISA Secure Conformity Assessment and ISA GCA, which is the Global Cybersecurity Alliance. We have many companies who are part of those programs who are present and sponsoring this event as well. We must continue together to work, maintain, and grow these efforts. We have many new challenges, as I'm sure you're aware. This includes, but is not limited to, Cyber Resilience Act, global conflicts, compliance needs, AI, and of course, ever-changing security risk.
Now, highlights from the Cyber Empowerment Forum, featuring Samford, Berta Jarošová, Cheri, Caddy, and Tatyana Bolton.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Samford. I'm the Vice President of Product and Supply Chain Security at Schneider Electric, and I'm very happy to join the stage this morning as your moderator with these lovely ladies here. We're going to explore how OT Cyber is evolving from legacy systems to building resilient operations and developing the workforce needed for the future. Panelists will share practical and insightful real-world examples. And so with that, panelists, do you mind introducing yourselves? Okay. You can go, Cheri.
It's on. Great. Thanks so much, Megan, and great to be here this morning. Thanks to all of you for being here. My name's Cheri Caddy. I am a senior cybersecurity advisor at Savannah River National Lab, one of the Department of Energy's national labs, 17 of our national labs. And I recently retired from 30-some years in the federal government, working in threat intelligence, infrastructure intelligence, culminating at the Department of Energy, and of course, working with the national labs in cyber R&D. So I've been working with standards for a long time, with our National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US, as well as standards in our defense and intelligence enterprise, and so delighted to be here again at ISA.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Berta Jarošová, and I'm from the National Cybersecurity Agency of the Czech Republic. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Prague. And it's great that ISA actually decided to host the summit in Prague. We're very proud. I'm also happy to hear all the great feedback about Prague. If you get bad feedback, also happy to hear that. I've spent my last 10 years in the government, working for not only the National Cybersecurity Agency, but also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense at the intersection of technology and national security. I'm currently posted to our embassy in Washington, D.C., cyber attaché. So for over the past 4 years, I've managed our bilateral relations with the United States, including working closely not only with the White House, but also CISA, NIST, DOE, but also the Department of State or other federal agencies that help us protect against cyber threats. So again, very happy that you came to Prague and looking forward to the conversation.
And hello, my name is Tatyana Bolton. I lead the cyber practice at Monument Advocacy, and relevant here, I run the Operational Technology Cybersecurity Coalition as its executive director. My background is mostly federal government, DoD, CISA, the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, so from the policy side. And now with the OTCC, of which I know a number of members are here at the conference, including Megan and Schneider, we do a lot of advocacy work around increasing awareness around OT security. In fact, this year we managed to get some OT provisions into the National Defense Authorization Act, so excited to see all that. But excited to start this conversation. So back to you, Megan.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to seeing if we can see OT CMMC materialize in the United States. But we're going to kick it off pretty light and easy. I'd say kind of a softball question for this group. But actually, Tatyana, let's start with you. What do you, and 1 minute each, sorry to be a Scrooge on the time there for this kicking off, but what do you consider to be the biggest challenge for OT security in 2026? If you had one thing, what would it be?
Money. I think, we know what to do. I think this entire room could tell you what needs to be done. All of you also have all the technology that we could ever need, I think. At this point, we've developed a lot of impressive technologies. It's the uptake, right? It's the awareness that it's even needed. And obviously, all of that is based on the requirements that are set from governments, which obviously in the United States are only voluntary. And even when we've tried to put in place specific requirements, like in the water sector, those were pulled back. So those are the types of things that we can't see anymore. I completely agree with you that we do need sort of more stringent, more directive requirements and money to go along with them.
All right, so when the funds are low, the guns will blow. You heard it here. All right, Berta, let's pass it over to you.
So I think for us really is the changing threat landscape and how to react to that in a timely manner, but also how to make sure that the critical infrastructure has better detection mechanisms when it comes to those attacks. So really, just reacting to the geopolitical landscape.
I think for me, having worked in what I would describe as technically focused public-private partnerships across the U.S. government for many, many years, both in the IT space and then more recently in the OT space, I think for the groups that I work with, awareness is still an issue. I work with a lot of partners in academia and, of course, the national labs, U.S. asset owners, state, local asset owners, and really understanding that cybersecurity is a problem for you is still a point of awareness. I work a lot with engineers. Engineers don't think that cyber is part of their purview, their responsibility. They think that that's the IT staff somehow. And so, just getting that message is still something I end up doing every day. Particularly, I think, for devices that have existed in the analog world before they were digitized and connected and put with sensors. I've done a lot of work on connected vehicle cybersecurity in the last several years, and I don't want to say people don't understand in major auto manufacturers that that's an issue, but outside of a lot of stovepipes, it's still a problem. And so I've been particularly focused on getting engineers more education in cyber, understanding that cybersecurity is something they have to do, even if we don't use the word cybersecurity as much because that tends to turn them off. But really, getting people to understand that things that used to operate without cybersecurity as a challenge. Now, that they're digitized and connected, that has to be something that's a consideration, and ideally a consideration at the earliest stage in the design of the thing, especially when you pair it with your cell phone. That just makes it worse.
Actually, Cheri, if you don't mind, I like the track that you're on, and so I'm going to hit you with 2 additional questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And this whole IT/OT convergence, I think the first time I heard the term, the professional picture of me that you see there was pretty new. So it's been a very long time. When do you think we will complete this IT/OT convergence? Is it becoming something different? So that's kind of question number 1 is, what about this convergence? Have we converged? And question number 2 is, with that in mind, what do you think is really going to define IT and OT, or something different, programs over the next 3 years?
So I think in terms of convergence, I think we're still on the cutting edge of things, especially with the introduction of applied AI. Everything is going to be impacted by this. Everything, I think, that's existed in the analog world will somehow be digitized and connected and automated in some fashion, even if it doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't need a connected coffee pot, but, they exist. And they're hackable. It's delightful. So I think there's a lot more ground to cover in terms of convergence. And of course, technology being what it is going to come rapidly. So the capability will be fielded well before we catch up with policy around safety and privacy for all of the data that those new devices are collecting. So I think for the next 3 to 5 years, the focus, we can't be in constantly reactive mode of something that we kind of know is going to be a problem, then becomes a problem, and then we have to remediate and spend a lot of money doing that. The only way we dig ourselves out of that is to start to focus upstream, shift left, as some people describe it. How do we design better products? How do we teach the engineers that are building those products and integrating them to think about security, cybersecurity, and privacy as key considerations in the building of those systems at the earliest stage? How can we help make that part of the practice? How can we make that a standard of care for engineers? So I think there's a lot of discussions to have there, but I think we have to invest in looking upstream, because that's the only way. If we get better products out there, better secure by design products, that's the only way we're going to get out of what's going to become a larger and larger attack surface as more things converge.
Jump in on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that. When I worked at Google, there was this guy named Christoph Kern, who you may know. He's an engineer and runs a significant portion of Google's security side, and focused a lot on this concept of building clear development pathways for engineers, so that you have only secure tools which are reviewed by the actual experts on security, so that when standard developers or anyone outside the sort of security expertise builds products, they're building it with secure tools, and so there's no option to introduce misconfigurations or errors into the code. And then I think most importantly, it has to be part of the curricula. So I still am very frustrated that cybersecurity is not part of all sort of software engineering across every single university in the world. I think if it is included, it is part of a specific cybersecurity class or a cybersecurity specialization. That's not sufficient. It has to be part of all of the disciplines that are touching coding. So if you are, if you're doing OT or IT, you get that as a safety measure from the very beginning. Otherwise, we're never going to get there.
All right, guess what? We're sticking with you again.
Okay.
So all of that being said, if you could change one thing tomorrow, what would it be? And you obviously can't say money again.
Well, I would love to include cybersecurity into every single curricula of engineering disciplines that touch coding all across the world. I think that you have to start left, right? You have to shift left. So the more you can do that, the better. To be fair, if I can add one more, I would also put in place baseline cybersecurity standards as a requirement, not as a voluntary option across all sectors.
So kind of this there's an emerging term you're going to hear over the next few years called minimum standard of care. Many companies have begun to include this in contracts in the absence of regulation to ensure that even if the customer may not know exactly what they need, that what they should have is at least being offered to them to not only reduce the risk to the customer, the critical infrastructure owner and operator, but to the supplier, and in many cases as well as the system integrator.
From the point of view of a national cybersecurity agency, then our role is making sure that those institutions that need to comply with the regulation, but also those who do not fall under the regulation, have some sort of guidance, more concrete technical guidance, how to, for example, transform their approaches, etc. So what we do is we issue more technical guidance on these processes. We also organize regular seminars, workshops to share best practices, etc. And one of the, I think, greatest achievements is we actually recently opened a OT lab together with not only the National Cybersecurity Agency, but also academia, and including some of our private sector partners and vendors, making sure that there is a space where they can test the equipment and how it actually complies with the different regulations, and to test the security of it. So we do a lot, but I think it's never enough, right?
All right, over to Cheri. Yes, thank you. Okay, Cheri, 2 questions again, sorry. In your mind, what is the most common false sense of security that asset owners have within OT environments? And where have you seen organizations underestimate risk, and what were the consequences of underestimating that risk?
I think the biggest underestimation that I continue to see is that either people, individuals, and organizations tell me I'm not a target, especially if you look at small municipal asset owners. They say, oh, I'm a small water provider in a little town. Why would anyone target me? I'm not a target. I don't have deep pockets to pay a ransom to a ransomware actor, so I don't have to worry. And it's just, it's not the right way to approach this problem. And I tell them, I'm sorry, you're all a target. When you have a greater amount of automation, of cyber attack tools, everybody's a target, and it's not the way to think about it. It doesn't matter with the tooling now that's available for bad actors to scale. And the consequences, that we see of that kind of thinking are the increase in attacks on small entities like schools or small hospitals or small local municipal public utilities. And so those are the entities that have to be available all the time, 24/7, and are more likely to pay a ransom, and the ransom amounts have gone down because criminals just want people to pay up quickly. So this whole thought line of underestimating the risk because of the size, or I'm not big, I'm not wealthy, it's just, I think it leads to a bad way of thinking. And we need to, we still need to educate people that, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're all a target. And so we keep having that conversation, and bad things keep happening. And unfortunately, when bad things happen, that's the time that is the best for learning.
No, thank you so much, Cheri. And right over to you, Berta, if you don't mind. Where have you seen cybersecurity actively improve safety, reliability, uptime, not just reduction of risk?
So I think I would go back to the awareness point, and kind of learning by managing crisis and living the experience of bad cyber attacks, because in the Czech Republic we have actually seen a wave of cyber attacks against the water sector in the small municipalities. And what we realized was that none of them actually thought they would have been targeted, and they were like, no, that's not possible. Why would we be of interest? And so I think based on that experience, we've seen that that really improved, and they kind of took steps on their own, even without having to comply with some regulations.
I see. And just following up on that, when you have been involved in incident response or crisis management, what has been your experience in terms of what are the key things that leadership wants to know?
So I think from the view of National Cybersecurity Agency, it's always the most important information you need is the target. Like, you need to know who is actually targeted, not only by whom, but also who. And that has been challenging in particular in this case, because very often, as I mentioned, when those attacks come from hacktivist groups, we, for example, find out about them on Telegram groups. So we know that those groups, for example, claim to have targeted subjects or targets in the Czech Republic, but we have no more information on that, and that is where we rely on information from, for example, international partners. So that there has been also a few cases where, thanks to our cooperation with the US partners, including FBI and their pre-ransomware notification program, we've been able to actually detect who has been targeted in the Czech Republic and actually contact them, share the IOCs, and then take the necessary steps. So really, it's information about the targets. In the most critical entities where we have that fall under the regulation and we have a list of POCs, we of course know who to contact, but it becomes a real challenge when you talk about the smaller entities where the impact can be still as great as in terms of the more important ones. So I would say really the more information about who has been targeted.
Clear. And really, if you don't mind, back over to you, Cheri, real quick. So those of you all, if you have the opportunity while you're here to grab Cheri for a few minutes and just hear a little bit about her career and her experiences, you really should. Because there are very few people that I've met in my career that I can say that have had a cooler or more interesting or more impactful career. And so with that, Cheri, can you tell me kind of from your heart, what are the attributes or what are the qualities in really high-performing teams? And it doesn't necessarily have to be cyber.
Ooh. Well, I think, I thought about this from a cyber perspective, and I think high-performing cyber teams, I've had the privilege of leading a lot of different teams from a lot of different places in the U.S. government and the White House, is really an integrated team. It's getting the right stakeholders around a table and understanding that cybersecurity has distributed equities, lots of different stakeholders that need to come together and understand where their distributed risk ownership is in what are connected environments. So just getting the right people around the table and understanding the joint activity, that their joint ownership in actually getting cyber outcomes, I think is, to me, the best hallmark of a high-performing cyber-based team. Thinking specifically about standards, I think, blending those different stakeholders means that they're coming with different standards. And when you are looking for the people that work for a chief information security officer and they're thinking about IT-related standards, if you're thinking about the people that are the business owners, the mission owners of those systems, they're thinking about things that are more economic standards and performance type standards. And those are the things that aren't necessarily going to match up neatly. A lot of the business owners think about their systems in terms of what's the price, not the total cost of ownership. That includes ongoing maintenance, including maintaining cybersecurity and privacy protections and supply chains over the long term. And so there's a total cost of that system, and it's not necessarily the lowest price option that's going to be the best on a long-term basis. So coming together with that understanding, I think, distinguishes a higher performing team, and understanding that how they measure success and how they, what kind of standards that they operate under to measure that success is going to be very different, and how can that work together is going to define success or failure, I think, in cybersecurity.
Thank you, Cheri. Okay, over to you, Tatyana. So, of course, we're going to have a question on AI, right? But Tatyana, can you give me your thoughts around how can AI, in theory, improve operational technology?
So actually, we are hosting a working group internal to the OTCC and with some of our partners, thinking about exactly this. What's going to happen? What's the change in speed going to do in terms of changing assumptions? I think that's actually one of the most interesting questions. I mean, I think it will improve security, but I think we need to first go back to the very basics, which is like, what are the assumptions that you have made in terms of security and the frameworks that you use that will be undermined by the speed at which AI attacks your systems. And that sets the tone for how we respond and how we architect things like is patch first mentality possible with the speed of AI? Or do we have to move to more of a microsegmentation and secure remote access perspective, assuming that, maybe not assuming breach, but certainly assuming that there's kind of, using a healthcare analogy, there's germs in the system. There's germs here, right? So we assume a certain level of risk, but make it such that the most serious outcomes are prevented. Right, so prioritizing some of those, prioritizing some of the response that we do, and some of the prioritizing where we put our money. The CVSS scoring system, is that going to work anymore? Or assessment cadences. If you are assessing, if organizations are doing assessments every year, but AI is forcing changes every 3 months, what's your year-long assessment going to do for you? So I think, there's a lot. I think I'm seeing a review of all those assumptions starting within all of the various owner and operators and OT experts to ensure that we're addressing some of those things and moving to a more defensible, resilient, architecture. And I am optimistic. I think, it will require a lot of work. It will require a lot of money. But, hopefully we can, stay ahead of the attackers.
If there's one shot, one opportunity that an organization could take to improve their cybersecurity over the next 12 months, what would it be? Berta, we'll go to you. Sorry, that was a millennial joke for those of you that caught it in the audience.
Yeah, I don't have single silver bullet, but I would say, again, as a national cybersecurity authority, we do organize regular cyber exercises. So I would say, if you're based in Prague, contact us and take part in one of the cyber exercises. I think we do not talk enough about the need to prepare. And I think you mentioned, Cheri, that it's not enough to be reactive. So it's also time to be proactive. I think we see it not only at the EU level, but also NATO level, but also our national level. So really, this cyber exercises have been a great tool for us to actually build relationships not only with the critical infrastructure, but also allowing to build the relationship between the different sectors or between the different institutions, but then also bringing in the vendors, etc., and discuss different scenarios that could actually come up and that are not unrealistic. I think we see it in Ukraine in the attacks, especially on the energy infrastructure. So really being proactive, building those relationships before the crisis or conflict actually comes, and I think those exercises are actually are also a great tool to test how the teams work together under pressure. And what has been really also, I think, productive is that we see the topic of OT resilience and preparedness being more and more incorporated in some of the key exercises at the EU and NATO level as well. So I think there is that helps to overall recognition that this is an area where we need to improve working together.
Yes, my wish list for the next year is continuing to focus on engineers. And yes, software engineers are important, but for OT, I'm talking electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, civil engineers. Yes, even if you want to pour concrete, you need to understand cybersecurity. And of course, nuclear engineers, like the ones I work with at my lab, all of those engineers that are building the physical things, they need to get more education in cybersecurity. They need to have the tools and the resources to incorporate cybersecurity and privacy considerations into all the systems that they build. We need to enable them to use the engineering tools, the engineering approaches and processes to problem solving in cybersecurity. I keep telling engineers, cybersecurity is just another problem, and engineers are built to solve problems. And so how can you bring your engineering problem-solving mindset and the tools that you learn to use as engineers to this unique problem set and manage the consequences that a cybersecurity problem could bring? So I think focusing on the engineers, getting them the tools, the education that they need to just build more secure things that we all rely on, and of course incorporating more cyber-informed engineering principles is certainly on my wish list for the next 12 months.
Thank you, Cheri.
And I will just add, if you're not currently significantly testing AI and the way in which it will affect, your OT systems or your clients' OT systems, absolutely do that. Like what we've seen from some of the surveys that I have read about AI is that the more you use it, the more you're comfortable with it, the more you're going to get out of it. And so I think, I'm assuming that many of you already are. Most vendors are, now sort of AI forward. But if you're not, I think lean into it more and more, because we're seeing the more people use it, you're also getting kind of interesting and novel implementation, and that can only happen when like the broad ecosystem actually gets its hands on it and starts to try it out.
Finally, highlights from a keynote address by Berta Jarošová from Women for Cyber, Czechia.
Although I said we do have different threat perception, I think in Europe and in the United States, or at least in the Czech Republic and the United States, we have managed to, over the past 2 years, I think, publish a number of joint cybersecurity advisories. So for those of you who might not be very familiar with those, these are prepared by different federal partners in the United States in cooperation with selected international partners. Usually it consists of work together done by the national certs and analytical teams, and they address a very specific topic, either an individual or a specific actor, either a specific tactique, either a policy question, or a specific cyber incident or a cyber threat. From our point of view, even though at the highest political level you may detect some of the differences in threat perception, at a very operational level, at least from within the cyber agencies and the certs, we see there is a convergence in the threat perception, because some of these cyber advisories, even though if they are not binding and they are very often just a guidance, they actually sum up the findings of different partners from Five Eyes and partners from the Indo-Pacific and Europe, and they do show that we have a common understanding of a particular threat. And the good thing is, I think they are public, because at least from our point of view, 5 years ago, this was not the case, and this kind of information would still just remain in the unpublic channels that we usually have between the governments. And then I think it comes down to our idea that despite the turbulence that we face, we are always stronger together. And if trust is shaken, that we need to find ways to actually build it again or uphold it or have a dialogue and realize that we are stronger together because the alternative isn't looking very good. And I think Czech Republic is not going away from the transatlantic bond that we've carried. And I think in cybersecurity, it translates also to some of the areas where we are cooperating and that are really important for the future. I just want to talk about a little bit about the importance of industry partnerships and the great investments we have in the Czech Republic. So you are now in the city of Prague, but there is a city of Brno, which is kind of like a cyber hub in the Czech Republic because that's where the National Cybersecurity Agency sits, but it's also where you have one of the best technical universities, the Technological University of Brno, but that's also where Honeywell has their largest R&D center in Europe. And they employ, I think, more than 1,000 engineers that work on cybersecurity, but also other technologies. And we are very grateful for that investment and for their presence in Prague or in the Czech Republic and the innovation they have been able to do and promote in this country. And second, I think it's important to underline the role of academia. So the Czech Technical University that actually sits in Prague is now headed by Michal Pěchouček, who is actually, I think, the most successful person in cybersecurity ever in the Czech Republic. He has built a startup that he sold to Cisco in the past, and now and he's the founder of the AI Cybersecurity Center that was actually established already 15 years ago. So he was kind of pioneer working closely with DARPA, but also DOE and Naval Office in the United States. And he's now heading the university, and why I mention it, because they have the Stratosphere Lab, which is a cybersecurity lab that really focuses on cybersecurity and the intersection with AI. And they have a very particular program on testing OT and threat analysis of OT. So if you're interested in partnerships with any Czech research institutions, I recommend reaching out to them as they also transform and internationalize more their work under the new leadership. And last but not least, I think people are power. And I want to say that because even though at a political level there may be disagreements and turbulences, at the end of the day, I think we all know that especially cybersecurity is about the people that spend every single day working on cyber issues or technical issues. And so I think the decision of ISA to bring the community to Prague and to host the summit in Prague just shows, and your commitment to actually come and to participate shows that at the end of the day, it's really about these relationships that we built on a very expert level between the different governments, industries, vendors, etc. And it's more about how powerful the community can be than how powerful the politicians can be. In the best case, the two go together, but I just want to acknowledge that I think gatherings like these really contribute to making sure that the cooperation between the United States and Europe, but perhaps also other partners, is upheld, or if not even deepened in the areas where we need it.
As the leading professional society for automation, ISA hosts a number of conferences and events to bring this awesome community together. Coming up, our flagship event, the ISA Automation Summit and Expo, on September 27 to 29 in Orlando. This event has something for everyone and is our fastest growing gathering, with over 630 attendees and 65 vendors last year. Whatever you're looking for, you can find it all at ASE. Visit isa.org/events to learn more. This has been Podomation, brought to you by the International Society of Automation. Thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people to find our content. Podomation is produced by me, Liz Neiman, and Morgan Fora at ISA. Our music is by Mixer Drummer and has been licensed from Pond 5.